In this video, we will be flushing the power steering system and replacing it with new fluid in this 2003 Toyota Camry. Taking a look inside the engine bay, we want to focus our attention on the passenger side. Specifically, we are looking for the power steering fluid reservoir. And on our cap, we can verify that it says power steering fluid. And we can see two lines connected to our power steering fluid reservoir. On these two lines, we do have one of them that is sitting just a little bit higher than the other one. The line that sits just a little bit higher is our return line to the reservoir. And for this process, we will be using a manual vacuum pump. Beginning this process, we can remove our reservoir cap and install our vacuum pump hose into the reservoir. And we'll give our pump a few pulls to build up the vacuum. And we'll then open up our pump and collect our fluid. We'll do this a couple times until the reservoir is empty. Once we have removed as much fluid out of the reservoir as possible, we will want to remove the clamp for the return line. And we'll put a towel underneath here before we work that line off, just in case some residual fluid flows out, and then work that return line off. My vacuum pump hose will then be inserted into the return line. This one has a nice tight fit. And then I'm going to install an additional piece of hose onto that port so that I can essentially cap off this port. This hose has an outside diameter of 1/2 inch and an inside diameter of about 0.325. I can then take a locking pliers and pinch that additional line off so that no fluid will flow out of this area. I will begin by topping off the reservoir with Amsoil multi-vehicle synthetic automatic transmission fluid, which is used as power steering fluid in this vehicle. We can then pressurize our pump, creating that vacuum that will pull the fluid through the system. And our objective is to continue adding fluid to the reservoir while continuing to have vacuum pulled. So we are pulling fluid through the system, and we want to watch the clear suction line until that fluid changes color to that nice translucent red transmission fluid color. So for the next step, I'm going to be doing three things. First, I'm going to always make sure that the power steering fluid reservoir is topped off. Next, I'm going to make sure there's just a little bit of vacuum always applied on the vacuum pump in that line. And lastly, I'm going to slowly rotate the steering wheel all the way to the left and then all the way to the right. With wheel chocks behind the rear tires and the parking brake on, I have jacked up the front of the vehicle just enough for the tires to be off the ground. So again, we're first going to make sure that the reservoir is topped off. We're then going to open our pump, which has a little bit of vacuum in the vehicle. Slowly rotate the steering wheel all the way to the left and all the way to the right. Now this does help if you have two people to do this job. To put this back together, I'm first going to disconnect my return line with my pump. Now keep in mind this tube is full of fluid, so we want to cap the ends with our fingers so it doesn't spill all over the engine. I'm then going to zip tie my return line higher than my reservoir temporarily so I can get my other line off. The end of my return line is sitting higher than my reservoir level, so no fluid should come out while I attempt to work off that other line. Now this line that I added on did end up being a little tighter on there than I anticipated, so I am just going to very carefully cut this line to remove it. However, keep in mind that there is fluid in the reservoir, so you will want to use your finger to cap that port so we can cut the zip tie on our return line and get that return line installed without leaking out too much fluid. And lastly, you will want to top off that reservoir again, making sure we are within the acceptable range, and then we can replace the cap. At this point, this repair is complete.